Hello everyone. Nika here with your daily neuro nugget, probably one of the most important neuro nuggets in this entire channel. As you guys know, I have focused 99% of my videos on this channel on Idaho versus Kohberger. And we are not done yet. We know there are still upcoming court dates around the end of the month, I believe July 22nd. And I'm like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. So I just had to grab a drink. I have like hot water. My house is very cold. We have a lot to talk about. We know, a lot of you guys know, if you watched, I'm just catching up. Kohberger pled guilty to all 4 counts of unaliving people and guilty to the count of burglary. What does that mean? Because there are a lot of things up in the air, a lot of rumors, a lot of theories. These are my conspiracies, my theories, my opinions. So if you want to disagree with me, totally awesome. I'm a Navy vet. I love freedom of speech, but remember to do so in a respectful manner. I will not be tolerating people who are threatening people in the chat. You will be blocked. You will be reported. I will send your IP address to a 3-letter agency. So there you go, right? Burglary for entering the home, right? Now, let's talk about what happened. It's a very quick summary. Again, Steve Gonsalves, it is my opinion. Well, it's not my opinion. We know this is not really over yet, right? We know that, again, there's still court dates upcoming at the end of July. But the first thing that came to mind as I'm watching this hearing is like, holy guacamole. How is it possible that 4chan was so right? Okay, there were a lot of things that were wrong there. There were a lot of things that were right in 4chan, including a lot of the names of Sigma Chi, a lot of the names of the frat boys, sorority girls, the things that took place there. They were right about how Ethan's leg was carved, which the prosecution has not really mentioned until recently, right? And all of this is very shocking, but 4chan in the early days mentioned that this case would never make it to trial, right? They mentioned this is never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And now a lot of people are wondering, is it possible that Kohberger is he actually in witness protection? Let me break that down for you, because 4chan mentioned this is never going to make it to trial. This is all investigating something much larger. We know that the FBI was in the area way before the IDAHO4, and they love to gather around when they're doing these massive investigations regarding, for example, the Aryan Hood Brotherhood gang, right? Now, as I'm going through the hearing, there are a lot of things, again, discrepancies that we need to point out, because remember, we are open-minded individuals. I have always said I am not siding with Kohberger. I am literally here for truth and justice, and as a veteran, constitutional rights. That is my priority. I do not care if we have actual evidence pointing to Mr. Kohberger being incarcerated. So be it. He should be held accountable for his actions if he did it. But that means we need to see the evidence, which we have yet not seen. Now, through the discrepancies, let's go over the discrepancies that were mentioned in today's hearing, right? According to Bill Thompson, Mr. Kohberger encountered Xana and did not plan to delete her. But then Mr. Kohberger is pleading guilty to premeditated unaliving. It doesn't make sense. Another contradiction, right? Let's assume that what Mr. Bill Thompson said is right? You're going in there, potentially Maddie was the target, and you happen to encounter Xana, and you did not plan to delete her, but now you kind of have to. How is that premeditated for all 4 counts? Remember, he pled guilty, premeditated for all 4 counts, right? Then we hear that Ethan's legs were carved, but like he couldn't carve a fish, right? That's why he was supposedly fired from his previous job. Can't carve a fish, but you can carve Ethan's leg. Now, there is one thing that I learned in psychology, well, lots of things, but the one thing that stands out to me is, especially criminal psychology, is when people are literally taking the time out of their day. This is already a very compressed timeline. Time is of essence. We already have difficulty making this crime fit Bryan Kohberger with the cameras, with the footage, with the lack of a blood trail leading out to where supposedly Dylan saw him leave, right? Time is of essence. And now we're supposed to believe that he also carved Ethan's legs. Excuse me? You're saying he also had time to diddle daddle and carve Ethan's legs? It doesn't make sense to me. And if Maddie was allegedly the intended target and he just happened to unalive everybody else because collateral damage, why would you take the time to carve Ethan's legs? This sounds very, very personal. A lot of things are still not making sense. And you have to remember, a lot of guilters are often like, I'm going to say 70% of individuals, right? They're very close-minded. They can't see past the narrative that they've been force-fed. But does it make sense to you guys? Please let me know in the chat. I promise I will eventually catch up in the chat with all of you guys. It doesn't make sense to me. If Ethan's legs are carved, like, this seems very, very personal, right? Now, I wanted to talk about the interview, because there was an interview of Kohberger's professor with Brian Enton, and she said several times that students in the field of criminal psychology often go to work with law enforcement or the feds, right? And she said it multiple times in this very brief interview. I'm like, why is she continuously mentioning this? Like, okay, she mentioned that, yeah, he was very normal, he was very studious, he was very, he was a good student. But again, time and time again, she mentions this field, we study unalivers, serial unalivers. That's what we do. And the majority of the time, they go to work with law enforcement, they go to work with feds. They go to work with law enforcement, they go to work with the feds. It made me think, because she said it several times, it's almost as if she was dropping a hint, like, is she dropping a hint? Is it possible that there was something going on? Again, we know that the FBI was in the area for much, much longer than the IDAHO4, before the IDAHO4 took place, right? Now, as I'm looking at Ann Taylor, Bryan Kohberger, Bill Thompson, Santa Claus, aka Santa Claus, and Hippler, the first thing I notice is that Hippler continuously gets tongue-tied when addressing Bryan Kohberger, which is very, very strange, because in 99% of all the other hearings that I've watched regarding Hippler, he's extremely cocky, too cocky for my liking, extremely disrespectful, has no regard for the court, doesn't know how to actually hold the court together. He doesn't know how to control the court. He's often rolling his eyes when the defense is talking, or he's like, yeah, just weird. But here, he almost seems to lack this confidence. And again, getting continuously tongue-tied when addressing Mr. Kohberger, right? Now, for all of you who have asked me, Nika, please address the fact that it's possible that Kohberger could be working for the feds, could be working for law enforcement. Is he going into witness protection? Is he a fed? I don't know, but paying attention to Ann Taylor and everybody else, paying attention to the body language between Ann Taylor and Mr. Kohberger, there seems to be something very odd, I would say fishy, going on. Because for somebody who, like Ann Taylor, kind of lost, right? This would not be considered a win. Some people may consider this a win because I guess you're not getting the firing squad, but it's still a loss. Again, this plea deal is a step up above the firing squad, not much better. This would be a loss, but the entire time I am seeing Ann Taylor smiling back and forth with Bryan Kohberger. it's really, really weird. It seems very fishy to me. Maybe she's just happy that he's not getting the firing squad, but it seems that they know something that we don't, right? And then we hear Bill Thompson, Santa, mention his bullet points. He's going through his bullet points, the state's bullet points. And all I'm hearing is that you still, to this day, you cannot place him at the crime scene. You only have images of some random Elantra, allegedly, before and after. But why is Bill Thompson still lying to the world? Did he forget we are watching? He goes on listing his bullet points, talking about how the victims were still unalived in their sleep. It's like, how low IQ, how stupid do you think we are? I mean, even the guilters to this day understand that, no, Bill Thompson, you can't fool us. We know that the victims were awake. We have heard of Xana's fingers being severed. We have heard of Maddie Mogen having several sources of DNA under fingernails, pointing to the fact that they probably fought for their lives in those last minutes. So again, why do you guys think that Bill Thompson is still talking about victims being unalive in their sleep? We know that's a damn lie, right? It all seems very rehearsed, right? Now, this is very random, but because Steve Gonsalves, again, is talking, again, yapping, we need to address Steve Gonsalves, right? Because we know that the Gonsalves family raised over, correct me if I'm wrong, allegedly over $150,000 for some trial, right? Did he not have multiple GoFundMes that the G fam did not have? Didn't they have multiple GoFundMes? $150,000+. Now, there's going to be no trial. So, do you guys think that Mr. Gonsalves, do you think the Gonsalves family is going to kindly return those hundreds of thousands of dollars that were raised? Because something tells me no. Something tells me no. Now, Bill Thompson just kind of underplayed everything in this hearing and basically said they have no evidence. And I wanted to talk about things that were not mentioned in the hearing, but it's always good to keep tabs on the people that were first involved in this investigation, because I think it's extremely telling and very concerning. Okay, the world has almost forgotten about Detective Payne, which was somebody who did not have really any experience in this type of massive investigation, and Chief Fry, right? And now I have just learned that Payne allegedly now has a job at U of I. Let me know how you feel about that. That's right. Detective Payne allegedly has a job at U of I. To me, that just seems very sinister as fudge. And also, Chief Fry is the new chief in Washington, allegedly. So it makes me wonder what is going on behind the scenes, because all of these, in my opinion, are massive, massive red flags that should be looked into, right? Now, for the guilters that are saying, Nika, there's so much evidence pointing to Mr. Kohberger being guilty. I mean, he said it. To these people, I say, have you guys not heard of just criminal psychology in general? Have you not heard of the Innocence Project in general? Just because people say they're guilty doesn't mean they are. When you look at the Innocence Project, there are so many people that later, 10, 20 years later, come forward and are like, I was coerced, I was threatened, I was this, I was that, and then they end up losing 20, 30, 40, 50 years in jail, right? So remember, just because somebody says they're guilty doesn't mean they are. He could just be afraid, he could just be trying to avoid the firing squad, right? And it makes me wonder, why would he admit to this knowing that they have no evidence, right? They still, to this day, can't really place him there. Are they threatening him? Well, yeah, right. They kind of are. We've heard the G family make threats pretty much directly, right? They've said that, if they don't get their way, that he'll probably be taken care of in prison. What does that mean? Does that mean that the G-Fam was allegedly planning to pay somebody off to have him handled? We know that the G-Fam has a long history of family members being incarcerated. Mr. Gonsalves's brother himself, right? A criminal, a massive criminal. So it's not a good look for Mr. Gonsalves, in my opinion, either, for the G-Fam either. It just makes me wonder, is he being threatened? Are they threatening his family, right? Innocent people have taken plea deals before, but here he wouldn't really gain anything. So what I want to see is the evidence. Innocent until proven guilty, right? Now, for 2.5 years, he said he was innocent. And again, as a veteran, as somebody who is a massive believer on freedom of speech, on constitutional rights, I think that everybody deserves their day in court, whether they killed 20 people or 1,000 people or not. That is my belief. I know a lot of people disagree. They have more of a communist mentality regarding that. You know, they see the world very black and white. But for me, I consider myself a patriot. I do think that everybody deserves their day in court. These are our rights we are talking about, right? Whether Mr. Kohberger did this or not, at the end of the day, this is a weak ass case. We still don't have a weapon. And as far as I'm concerned, the touch DNA, it's fallible. It's fallible. It's not good enough. This is why touch DNA is not used in military courts for that same reason, because it's flawed. And if Mr. Kohberger can show that they violated his rights, his constitutional rights, he can get away with unaliving whoever he basically wants to. I'm not saying that is right, but I'm saying all that Mr. Kohberger has to do is be able to prove that they violated his rights when they arrested him, which Ann Taylor has mentioned time and time again, right? Remember, the job of law enforcement is to uphold the law, not to violate our rights. And I'm not saying, again, if Mr. Kohberger did this, he should be held accountable for it. But until he has his day in court, until they can prove that he actually committed this crime and that they did give him his day in court without violating his rights, then he is innocent until proven guilty, even when he claims to be guilty. Because remember, taking a plea deal, like I mentioned yesterday, does not mean that he can't take that back. You know, there are several ways that he can do that. And again, a lot of people don't understand that because we are not taught law. We are not taught how the courts work in or against our favor if we ever find ourselves in that situation, right? Oops, sorry, guys. That was an ad on this video. And please let me know if you are in the chat or if you are joining us late, if you are part of the replay crew, make sure to vote in the comments or in the chat. Do you think that Ann Taylor and her team may have something up their sleeve? Do you think this is it? Do you think he's just going to chill in jail for the rest of his life, that he's not going to try to fight this? If you think that, please leave a 1. If you think that Mr. Kohberger could attempt to appeal this plea, and again, legally, there are loopholes to be able to appeal this plea, please leave a 2, right? Who's in here today? Hello, Open Mind. Hi, Suds. Suds says, didn't the FBI have BK on the radar for something else prior to the 4? Allegedly. Elwing says, yes, Hitler knew the whole thing was staged. Theodore says, it's like he's nervous. Yes, Hitler seems nervous to me. It's odd, again, because we've always seen him as a very confident, almost arrogant, right? With the eye rolls, with the calling out the defense. But today he came across as very nervous to me. Now, Mitchell says, remember Ann said 2 weeks ago she needed more time to represent her client. It was denied. Now he pleads out. Which would make sense, right? Because then, like I mentioned yesterday, you can appeal later on. People don't understand that you can appeal this type of plea deal, especially if you did not have proper legal representation, which includes not having enough time to analyze all the evidence, right? Theodore says, I would say judge has a superiority complex. Open mind. She was smiling. She was smiling a lot, right? The whole case is very, very weird. It is very strange. Or it is very possible that Brian is going to prison for the rest of his life, right? Yeah, that of course is a possibility. Thank you so much for the kind comment, Phyllis. Bobcat says, do you know General Joe owns and runs the Kangaroo Courts? Theodore says it's almost as if through the plea deal they're exposing the true perpetrators. Interesting. Yes, baby BB. The body language from the defense and the prosecution was something I noticed. Now, I also wanted to touch on Bill Thompson's body language. It was really, really strange. This was not the typical Bill Thompson we have seen. It was strange. He was like looking at the floor half the time. Like he was very focused on reading his scripted bullet points, which were all lies. Like, why to this day are you still bullshitting us, Bill? We know that the victims fought. Why are you still feeding us, force feeding us the narrative that the victims were sound asleep? We know they were not. Stop lying to us, right? And he was just weird. Like, he started getting emotional. Look, I understand we're all human, we get emotional, but I am not buying that last bit when he's mentioning the names of the victims. It seemed fake to me. It seemed staged to me. Why are you getting emotional, bro? Like, are you gaslighting us? Are you trying to manipulate us? It was weird. This is not the Bill Thompson we have seen. Into the Break says, Ann Taylor's posture said it all to me. She was sitting far from him and was turned to have Brian in front of her. I saw the smiles, but the body language said way more to me. And Bill Thompson said that he stabbed both Kaylee and Maddie, but we know that there were different weapons used, right? Maria says, even if AT didn't have enough time to sort the alternative perps, but he would carry on with the trial and not plead guilty. I just don't get this at all. Yes, but you also have to understand how family works. Allegedly, we have heard that Brian Kohberger's family is very, very religious. Is there maybe the possibility that they are not for having their son unalived by firing squad? And from what we've heard is that Mr. Kohberger's relationship with his mother, he's very close to her. If your mother is begging you on the phone to just say that you're guilty so that you don't get the firing squad, I think some people would say, well, I'll do whatever it takes to make my mother happy, right? It's also very possible. Hello, Sid. Welcome to today's live. Happy Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? Cheryl says, I don't think he's guilty at all, but he's being massively railroaded. I think this was Ann's last-ditch effort to save BK's life. Busted Flush, #1 today. Nika, I'm so upset today as I feel like this is so off. Something is up. Backseat Bill, the plea deal prosecutor only offered this when Molly came out and YouTubers got too close. And I mentioned this a couple of my last videos. Although we are following protocol, we are following YouTube's policies, blah, 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 they are still censoring us. There have been so many of you that have reached out to me and said, Nika, your videos go out for like 30 seconds in the middle of the video. That is legit censoring right there. It just makes you wonder, right? And on top of that, when, you know, we are at a time when all of these books are coming out, when all these Netflix specials are about to come out on BK, we haven't even found this man guilty yet. It's like, they have this ready to go. It almost seems pre-staged to me. That being said, Busted Flush, I personally don't think that this is something that we should really get too emotional about, because we never really know what's going on behind the scenes. And I understand I do have a psychology background, so I'm able to decompress quite easily from this. But if this is getting to be too much for you or whoever is watching, your mental health comes first. You need to learn to step away and take care of you first, right? Because we don't need you losing sleep over, again, something that could be even pre-planned, right? Or pre-staged or whatever. It's not worth it. Vacation time for the G's. I mean, why not, right? They got 150 grand or more, I don't know, that they won't be using for trial, right? So is he back to Brazil? Is it going to be back to Brazil, back to using the Bitcoins in Brazil? I don't know. Sweet says, how disappointing that we will never know what really happened. I don't believe that at all, because again, when we look at several cases, and I've always said I'm a big believer of this, like, the truth always comes out. Sometimes it's too late, like I've been saying in the beginning, since the very beginning of this channel, and it always comes out. You can only suppress the truth for so long. This is why things like the Innocence Project, right, where people have spent, really wasted their life in prison, and then the truth comes out like 20 years later, like, I don't know, all these people involved in the crime directly or indirectly will say, oh, well, I lied because of this, or I didn't say things to law enforcement because I was scared or whatever. I'm very curious to see what Dylan and Bethany are going to say in the future. Remember, when people are involved in cases like this, at some point, sooner or later, they end up opening their mouth. They need to vent. They need to release that. It's a lot to carry for majority of people, unless they're like zero, less than 1% of the population who are psychopathic, which I really doubt. It's just a matter of time before somebody opens their mouth or feels guilt or feels remorse, something. Or at the very least, maybe we'll hear from Brian Kohberger if he really did this. Maybe we'll get some insight into if he did this or why he pled guilty. But right now, it's my opinion, all of this is really odd. The body language of the judge, of Ann Taylor, of Brian Kohberger. People are saying that Mr. Kohberger appears to be going through the motions. I actually heard people say that Mr. Kohberger was not Mr. Kohberger today, that it was a double, or that it was AI, that Mr. Kohberger has black hair. I'm like, wow, it's crazy to me that 3 years in almost, people still don't know what Mr. Kohberger looks like. Bro, he does not have black hair, okay? He does not have black eyes. I don't know where people are getting this information. This was a live hearing. This was not a double for Mr. Kohberger. I think this was him. A lot of people were surprised to hear how high-pitched Mr. Kohberger's voice was, but I wasn't, because we've heard his voice before. If we've been paying attention to this case, we heard his voice when he got pulled over by that female officer and he was asking questions. It sounds like typical Mr. Kohberger to me, and people are saying this guy's a demon amongst humans on this planet. That's what he is. He is a demon, and he is sociopathic, psychopathic, but he's autistic, remember, right? He's autistic. What does that mean? His body language is, okay. We don't know how he's feeling inside. Externally, he seemed pretty calm. That being said, there was a portion of the hearing, the first time where he stood up to address Judge Hippler, he actually stood up. Was it out of nervousness? Was it out of political correctness? He stood up and raised his hand, and Judge Hippler said, you don't have to stand. I appreciate it, but you don't have to stand, right? So the grift is over for the G, says Pansy Face. That's right. How come Steve G is now coming out screaming? I thought he was so happy it was Brian and only him. Yeah, but we know that the G fam is not going to be happy because they want him unalived. They want the jugular. Is my opinion that they are not going to be happy until Mr. Kohberger is unalived. And like I said yesterday, that makes this whole case very, very dangerous. It makes, in fact, having a trial very dangerous, because the way that the GFAM has expressed themselves, did they not mention that he would be handled in the prison yard or something along those lines? Somebody shared that with me. Sorry, but BK's never getting out of prison. Yeah, it's very likely to, right? But he definitely did have threats, right? The Aryan groups might want him taken out. DM says she's seen a fireman, remember? Something along those lines, right? Payne is getting paid off. Fry is paid off. Well, I mean, when we say things like that, a lot of people say that's extremely far-fetched because we're not able to verify that, right? But the fact that Payne allegedly now holds a high-ranking position at U of I, and the fact that allegedly Fry holds a high-ranking position as a chief in Washington is a big red flag to me, right? SC Warner says someone in jail got to him recently. I agree, Sid. The FBI did not say Mr. Kohberger's DNA was on the sheet, right? They never said that. And for people who want me to address the fact that the FBI was in the Moscow and Pullman region way before the IDAHO4, you have to understand if this is deeper than Brian Kohberger, or if this is larger than the IDAHO4, it's going to take a long time before we hear about it, because a lot of you guys, you know, are from military families or law enforcement, three-letter agency families. You understand that they're not going to give us the details while investigations are taking place. Some of these large-scale investigations, for example, by the DEA, take upwards of 3+ years to really round up the bad guys, right? The Aryan Brotherhood gang, I pick on them because they are one of the largest in Idaho. A lot of people say, well, the Mexican cartels, but when we actually look at statistics on the DEA website, we know that the Aryan Brotherhood is very, very powerful in Idaho. And the FBI was there in the area, rounding up the Aryans, rounding up the gangster Aryans, because they arrested so many of them, and it was one of the largest drug busts in history, okay? And little old Idaho. So again, going back to what Brian Kohberger's professor said in today's interview with Brian Enton, it just makes you wonder, right? She mentioned people like Kohberger, people in that field. The majority of the time, they go on to work with law enforcement or the feds. So is this something that Brian could be doing with the feds? Is he still working with them? We don't know. And again, when people like this are working with the feds, they're not going to tell us, okay? We don't do this for security purposes. I have family members that work with the DEA, for the DEA, and their lives are on the line. Like, they have to literally change their lifestyle overnight, right? If they're being tracked, if they're being followed, they have to get up at 2 a.m, pick up their children and their wives and flee to another country for safety. This is serious stuff. This is not something that's going to be released on the news. So again, for people who are losing their sleep over this case, please don't, because as somebody who was in active duty military, who was deployed, who was also stationed overseas, we don't always share what's going on, what we're doing, our missions, ever, sometimes ever, right? But we also have to be realistic here. Is it possible that Mr. Kohberger actually did commit this crime and is just saying, I'm screwed, there's no way out, Ann Taylor did what she could, I'm just gonna plead guilty instead? Yes, that is also a possibility. But for me and the type of person I am, and I think the type of people most of us are on this channel, we want to see the evidence, because otherwise, if he actually did do this crime, he's gonna be like one of the most famous serial unalivers in history, because to do this with minimal trace and minimal time in the world of technology that we have now, and still leave basically no actual DNA behind, just touch DNA, which is flawed, which is not used in most countries, it is not used in military courts. Like, if you actually committed the crimes, Kohberger, I mean, he's gonna be in these psychology books for sure in the future. And as somebody who studied psychology myself, guys, honestly, a lot of people who commit crimes, like the IDAHO4, for example, Ted Bundy, they want to be remembered in such a way, right? So it's not that far out of our scope. I'm not saying he's guilty. I'm not saying he's not guilty. All I am saying is that I need to see the evidence. And all I'm saying is that nothing makes sense. Today, everybody's body language was off the charts. Why is Hitler shaking? Why is he stumbling on his words? Why is Bill Thompson still lying about that the victims were found sleeping, right? Or that they were unalived in their sleep? Why are people still lying? Why is Ann Taylor smiling to Kohberger and back and forth? It was very, very strange. I have this belief that there's something else going on behind the scenes. If any of you are from previous military families or law enforcement families, let me know in the comments, because I think a lot of us have direct experience with these types of cases, and we just know that something is off, right? So Dana, Ann Taylor was smiling a lot, right? Right. Smug Plucker Anonymous says, we got serious problems in this country. We definitely do. And not to even get into it, but we also know what's going on at the same time. The whole Diddy case. I might talk about that in a separate video. But yeah, guys, make sure to vote in the comments. And for people who are saying, Nika, are you going to disappear? Are you going to disappear off the face of YouTube? Because, you know, this case is basically over. This case is not over till it's over. Again, we still have court dates pending at least through the end of July. And maybe I'll disappear. Maybe I won't. Again, I almost never really disappear. I've literally been banned by the platform here like 4 times already. I've had YouTube for over a decade. My first channel, I think I had like over 100,000 viewers. So I actually never disappear. I just like transmute and transform. So make sure that you guys stay up to date with me for whatever we decide to do here. If you guys want me to continue talking about true crime, I don't mind doing that either, right? If not, I'm just gonna go do another channel of something else. That's what I do. I've done YouTube, like I said, for a decade. And I'm kind of all over the place as far as YouTube goes. I've talked about veganism. I've talked about relationships. I've talked about everything, like literally everything. I've talked about money, old money, new money, almost any topic that you guys can think of, I've probably covered on YouTube. So make sure to vote. Let me know if you guys would like for me to keep talking about true crime. This is very concerning to me. This case, sense. None of it is making any sense, right? So we'll see where we go. Make sure that you find me on Instagram. My Instagram is always in the description of each and every video. And yeah, Thank you guys. I'm gonna head out now. Oh my gosh, it's almost 4. I gotta go to my other job. Bye guys. Take care. Have a wonderful night.